Taoiseach, over the last number of years, the beef farmers in this country have been under enormous strain and pressure, with falling incomes on a consistent basis, coupled with higher input costs annually. I suppose one could say that fundamentally, if you look back and look at it from a distance, the primary producer has been increasingly marginalised in the overall sector. In my view, the government and indeed the beef industry itself have reacted far too late to what has been a growing crisis and a deepening crisis for many, many beef farmers out there. And that belated response has been a contributing factor to the crisis itself, but also, I would put forward, to the difficulty in resolving it now. The National Ploughing Championships commenced today, an event that showcases the very best of Irish agriculture and farming, but it's against the backdrop of the severest crisis facing the beef sector in many years. I think it is fair to say that the crisis has been exacerbated by the Brexit situation, but I think also the signing and endorsement by Government and indeed Commissioner Hogan of the Mercosur beef deal further enraged beef farmers at a particularly difficult time. We now have a situation where thousands of workers are being laid off, with very negative consequences for the economy in those towns and in the hinterland of those factories. Last March, Fianna Fáil constructively tabled a private member's motion calling for progressive action to be taken on fair prices, the 30-month age restriction, 4-movement rule, weight restrictions on cattle, 70 days residency and transparency in the beef supply chain. And we've been calling for a food ombudsman for quite a long time. It's interesting in the signed agreement this week that many of those elements are now contained in that agreement, but it's taken this long to get some significant movement on these issues. In my view, government didn't act urgently enough on that motion. We did have during the local elections what was an electorally engineered scheme between Commissioner Hogan and the government, but subsequently we learned that there was a lot of caveats and conditions attached to the BEAM initiative, resulting in many small farmers in particular not applying because it involved a reduction in livestock. Negotiations this week have resulted in an agreement signed together by the representative bodies of the farming sector. This hasn't yet translated to the picket line and the blockades have not been lifted. I think this reflects a lack of trust, a level of frustration among farmers out there and a breakdown in relationships between all in the sector itself. I want to say to you, we welcome the agreement and we believe that space should be given to the various farm organisations to discuss, advocate and vote for the deal, and speedy implementation has to occur. But I would put it to you, Taoiseach, that the government should still seek further cap market disturbance aid for losses since May. It should avail of all avenues to increase the live export trade. Again, it was tardy on that front. And work towards the introduction of a €200 suckler cow payment in the next Common Agricultural Policy. And you should reject the Mercosur deal, which will undermine EU climate change policy. I would ask you, would you agree to those measures, and do you accept that a comprehensive series of measures have to occur to ensure a sustainable future for beef farming in this country?
Taoiseach.
Thanks very much, Deputy. I want to start by welcoming you back, Ceann Comhairle, and all the members of the House, the press gallery and the staff of Leinster House for what will be an eventful session, I believe, in Leinster House, and we have much to do. In relation to your question, Deputy, I just want to start off by acknowledging the extraordinarily difficult times that beef farmers in Ireland are facing. For over a year now, prices paid to beef farmers at the factory gate have been very low, around 350 cents per kilo, which is less than the cost of production. And because that has persisted for so long, many farmers feel at their wits' end. There are a lot of reasons as to why prices are low. We have consumption and demand that's flat, production is up, and of course sterling is weak. But the price that Irish farmers get is roughly the European average. It's set by the market, not something that's set by government or by anyone in here, and is largely a function of supply and demand. But government is helping and is certainly trying to help, and has done a lot in the last year or so to assist farmers. For example, opening new markets in China and across Asia, a 60% increase in Board Bia's budget to open new markets around the world to Irish beef. 40 million provided in the last budget, both for areas of natural constraint, but also for beef, the beef environmental programme. 100 million euros just made available in recent weeks to support farm incomes. About 80 million of that 100 million has been allocated now, still 20 million available there. And these are very significant supports, much greater than supports that would be offered to any other loss-making sector. But it's done for a reason, because we care about family farms, we care about the livelihoods of our beef farmers, we care about the future of the beef industry and its wider value to the rural economy. And for the first time now, producer organisations have been recognised, and that could potentially change things significantly, because at the moment farmers are price takers. The establishment of producer organisations for the first time allows farmers to come together as a group and to negotiate proper contracts and proper prices with the factories, and that can help and should help to increase prices paid to farmers, but that needs time now to be allowed to operate and to function. In relation to the questions that you raise, the Common Agricultural Policy will be reformed as part of the new EU budget, and it's very much the position of the Irish Government that the CAP budget should be protected in full. We're not agreeing or accepting to the 5% cut that's been proposed by the European Commission. But I do think that if we're going to convince European taxpayers and our European partners to defend and protect the CAP budget, it is going to need to be reformed and modernised and take account of things like the environment and animal welfare, even more so than it does at the moment. Mercosur is not yet signed. That's not correct. In about 2 years' time, that deal may be put to Member States for ratification. And as I've said before, we will not support a trade agreement that damages the environment or exposes our industry to unfair competition.
Thank you, Taoiseach. Deputy Martin.
First of all, again, I would just make the point that much of what was contained in our private member's motion earlier this year has now found its way into the agreement that was discussed this week. And it seems to me that a lot of time was lost and a lot of resentment and frustration was allowed to be built up within the beef farming sector before people got down to work and began to engage. And that's a great pity, because fundamentally it's a question of fair prices. I believe in food security. I believe in a country like Ireland needs to retain key sectors like the beef sector and to have a diversity of food supply within our own country and to contribute to Europe. I fundamentally believe in that. But to ensure that that happens, a greater weight has to be given to the primary producer. And that the role of the primary producer has been eroded for quite some time now, and that's at the heart of this particular crisis, and that needs to be redressed. And some of the proposals in the agreement have merit, but they could have been initiated well over a year or 2 years ago, in terms of the task force, in terms of the price index and so on, measures that we've been advocating for quite some time,
Thank you, Deputy.
but which have taken this crisis to develop a response. And in the context of Mercosur, Taoiseach, when I use the phrase sign off, I'm not saying literally signed off, but I was in here when Minister Bruton essentially endorsed it in the floor here, and Commissioner Hogan particularly did. And that 100 million scheme that you spoke about, no one told small beef farmers in the middle of the local elections that scheme was about reducing livestock, and that you'd have to engineer a 25% reduction in your stock if you were to gain and apply for that. And that is the problem. You might confirm, Taoiseach, whether it's the government's intention to seek further support from Europe along the lines of that exceptional aid scheme because of market disturbance that has occurred and the very low prices that beef farmers are now getting for their cattle.
Taoiseach.
Thanks, Deputy. Mercosur at the moment is only at the level of a political agreement, and that political agreement was signed off on not just by the entire Commission, but in particular Commissioner Malmström from your own political family, who is the Trade Commissioner. But in 2 years' time, when there is a legal agreement, we'll be in a position to assess it and take a position on it then. But I've said before, we will always defend the interests of Irish industry and Irish farmers when it comes to any trade agreement. We have secured 100 million in income support for farmers, 50 coming from the Exchequer, 50 coming from the European Commission. As of now, only 80 of that 100 million has been drawn down. But yes, we can certainly give consideration to a further request, but that has to come at the appropriate time, and that 100 million has yet to be fully drawn down. As I'd say, in relation to the protests and the blockades, Minister Creed convened talks. Those talks were successful in coming to an agreement. 6 farm organisations representing the vast majority of farmers in the state have endorsed that agreement. The protesters were successful in highlighting the issues affecting beef farmers. They did bring the industry to the table, but all that can be achieved from protests and blockades has now been achieved. And I would ask that they end now and that people try to make this agreement work, because I am deeply concerned, and I think everyone in this House who cares about the beef industry, who cares about rural Ireland, who cares about employment, is concerned that continued protests and continued blockades will lead to more job losses. There have been 3,500 job losses already. There is a risk that meat plants, meat factories may close permanently, and this could do long-term irrevocable damage to the industry, and I don't think anyone in this House wants that.
Thank you.